Okay, well, welcome back to the last, number 3, part 3 of this week's series on the rise and clash of ideologies. And as I said in the end of last video, there's another component, another set of isms that are being picked up in the popular press. They're being picked up by different societies, different groups of people. And again, it's all about what benefits me. The isms, these narratives, keep in mind they have to benefit the user, the believer, the follower. If liberalism is not something that benefits me, I'm not going to be a liberal. If conservatism is not something that benefits me, I'm not going to embrace conservatism. So all of these have backers, and the backing go back to that triangle, that cycle of choices. They're in a situation, they have this ideology, it provides them certain opportunities, so they back it and bloom it and make it bigger and expand it and apply it in whatever they possibly can. And this next one is a doozy. So let's jump into that, shall we? Do you remember back when we talked about Darwin? Charles Darwin, and in this particular time, the latter part of the 1850s, Darwin comes up with a theory of how life got to be where it is. And I told you last time that he jumps on his buddy Charles Lyell theory that talks about geology. Geology meaning the age of the earth, the age of our planet, the age of everything is millions and millions and millions and millions of years old. And Darwin sort of jumps on this belief, this principle, this assumption, and starts building his theory, dealing with the different species of mankind, the different branches of mankind, and that each one, he says, has adapted to their environment, to their circumstances over time, over hundreds of thousands of years. They have adapted. People in colder weather might build up an immunity to cold, whatever. There's different things that might happen. People who are in very hot, sunny areas might end up with deeper or more melanin in their skin, darker skin, to compensate, to adapt to their environment. Well, all of these who survive over time, he says, passes those beneficial mutations, those beneficial traits, onto their children and children's children, et cetera, so that these populations with these better traits get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the strongest of these species, the strongest of these variants, win. The survival of the fittest. And even though Darwin was not a proponent of the things that I'm going to talk about, I have found nothing that says that he advocated for the application of his theories in this way, or in these ways that we're going to discuss. Nevertheless, he has laid the foundation, and he knew there was going to be trouble. I don't think he knew how much trouble, but he knew there was going to be trouble and actually wrote about it. So, his theory sparks at this time controversial narratives. Remember, narratives have their base, their stories have their base in ideologies, and those ideologies are serving people. So, this is a caricature. Obviously, it is not pro-Darwin, but this is in 1874, so it's not much longer after he published his book. This is the idea that we all come from monkeys or apes or some animal-ish kind of species in the past. And of course, this is creating controversy. People are fighting over this. This is not true. This is true. And I'm talking scientists are fighting over this. Scientists did not embrace Darwin's theories right away, but many of them fought. But what happened was this was such new science, so innovative. This was the age of of thinking and reasoning and innovation and creation of new things in the Industrial Revolution, that it sort of took over the mindset of societies all over the Western world, throughout Europe, throughout the United States, all over the place. It wasn't just where we came from, it was applied to politics, applied to economics. There was like Darwinian economics, Darwinian politics, there's Darwinian nationalism, there's Darwinian socialism. There's all these Darwinian isms, these new systems of thinking that were based loosely on his theories. Well, if you think about it, it sort of makes sense. I mean, it's not hard to think of it as if we all come from different backgrounds, different roots, shall we call it, different species of animals, then there are obviously some sort of like branches, some descendants of that, some species of mankind that must have adapted faster. They must have better variants than other species of man. And doesn't that mean that if we're all in this race to see who is going to be superior, who is going to be the dominant creature, so to speak, this dominant species, that it would make sense if I can put down, destroy even, oppress the less adaptive, the less superior species that haven't evolved quite as well as my species, whatever group I belong to. And this merges with nationalism, the idea of identity, this idea of who makes a German. That should sound familiar. Who is the superior race? Who is the top person? Who is the most brightest, the most worthy, the most fierce species of all the different kinds of mankind, all the different kinds of races? And therefore, it's a matter of national survival. I have to do everything in my power as a Frenchman to make France number one, top of everything, best in industry, most wealthy in economics. It has to be the purest Frenchman, to be the purest of all of the French race. All these things start to come into play. Everybody wants to grab a piece of something. There is therefore a restriction on free trade during this time, meaning I'm going to hoard everything I possibly can. Everything's going to be for me. I'm going to put in protectionist laws so that you can only buy from me, you can only sell with me. I mean, it's just this big border around everybody, this protective fence. There's also this big, global grab for raw materials. If I have the biggest industry, I want the biggest industry with the most product, the most valued merchandise and products going out to the world. Everybody wants to buy my stuff. Then I have to have the raw products to produce the most, the best. And so I'm going to go grab it wherever I can. If you think back to 1850s, you're moving on a little bit farther. And what do we see? We see that Britain is pouring opium into China so that it can keep its goods coming from China, and China can't close it down. That's this kind of nationalistic, we got to be the best, we got to be the top dog. We're going to smash any nation that gets in our way, because this was the mindset that just obsessed nations and people and politics and societies at this time. We want to build a bigger empire. Social Darwinism comes in. This is the idea of racism starts to pick. Prior to this, racism is more a matter of, you're Anglo-Saxon or you're Latin or you're more Slavic or things like that. It was a little bit more like that. It wasn't so much about skin color. It wasn't about necessarily where you live. It was sort of like your ancestry. Where do your roots come from? But at this point, there's this change. There's a real change. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this as we get into the latter part of the 1880s, 1890s, that region, because it's going to become a really big deal. People are going to get on board and they're going to look at other people and they'll look at the color of the skin, the shape of their skull, their nose, their jawline, how tall they are, how small they are, and they're going to make assumptions under some false science that says, oh, well, science shows that the person with the big jawline, they're a lot closer to the ape. Look at the ape skull. Look at the Negro's skull. And look at the Anglo-Saxon skull. She's, this lady has all nicely formed and everything. But look at the Negro. He's going to jut it out like this in his profile. And so does the chimpanzee. So does the monkey. Doesn't the monkey look like that? So they must be really close. And therefore, I can put down the Negro. I can exterminate the Negro. And you think, well, that's pretty out there, Mr. Wilson. Yes, I know it's pretty out there. But as we move on and move into the 1900s and get in the early 1900s, I will show you documentation. This is how people talked. This is how England talked about the south of Africa and the people in Africa. How they waged war. Do we go over and wage war? Do we step into this African nation or tribe fighting this African nation and tribe? No. Let's let them go over and kill each other off because they're primitive. They're really old. Let them go over and do most of the killing first and just let them die out. Then we, who are far more superior, far more intelligent, will go in and we'll clean up afterwards and then we'll take it over. I mean, that's sarcasm, by the way. My wife keeps saying I need to tell everybody when I'm being sarcastic because they don't know whether I'm being real or serious or not. And I'm being totally facetious. But that's the thinking. That's how people talked. And we're going to look at that again later. But do you understand how this idea of nationalism and Darwinian thinking sort of kind of blend in a sort of warped kind of way and feed each other into a new sense of nationalism? So you get to the end of all this and you have this gigantic clash then of, who am I? What do I believe? What system do I embrace and hang on to? And you have things, the Civil War and after the Civil War in America, that was a perfect example of this fighting, this tension between nationalism, this new nationalism and this new liberalism. So new nationalism, the slaves in the South have been freed, they're emancipated, and almost within a matter of years, the South throws down some major obstacles for the ex-slave to sort of find their natural rights, to find their equality, to sort of embrace that sense of being created equal amongst men. And you have the rise of the KKK, which was just a political bully. They went around beating up and lynching people who wanted to vote in favor of certain laws that would be in favor of the blacks in the South. Jim Crow laws came into being. There was a lot of oppression. So the question was, well, weren't they free? And the answer is yes, they were. The nation made them free. However, when it came to, well, do we give liberty, true liberty? Do we fight as a nation for the black man, the black family? Or do we try to keep the nation together because we got to be number one? We got to be the most powerful. And if we go with the black man, you know what's going to happen. There's going to be tension. We're not going to be doing very good. There's going to be division in our country, and we're not going to be top dog anymore. And somebody's going to come along and take us over. So in the latter part of the 1800s, rather than backing the ex-slave and working, fighting for them, the U.S. government backs off, turns a blind eye, and sort of allows a lot of things to happen in the South that they shouldn't have allowed to happen in the South. Why? To maintain unity of the nation. Nationalism overrode liberalism. The individual didn't matter as much if it meant that the nation would crumble or appear weak. And that's sort of where this whole rise and clash of ideologies is at its peak, is this. Now we're into the 1880s, 1890s. We're about to turn the century into the 1900s. Things are not right. The ideas and ideologies have risen up, and they are causing strife. And people are trying to grab hold of different ideologies, different systems, in order to find rest, in order to find freedoms, in order to find protection, in order to find strength. And we're missing kind of a global harmony. Nations are coming apart. And that's where we're going next time, next week. See you then.